Tom, in trying to understand aesthetic cognitivism, I like to go to the intellectual foundations of it. And clearly one of those foundations is the cognitive science of religion, of which you had a major role in creating the field. So I'd love to learn about the history of how that happened.
Okay. Well, part of it is when I started teaching at Western Michigan University, having graduated with philosophy of religion, it was the first university in the country to have a department of religion. Because up until that time, private colleges had departments of religion. Anyway, I felt that I couldn't, adopt a theological approach. So I better find out, are there other approaches to the study of religion? I was very dissatisfied with the way what psychologists and sociologists said about religion. And so I decided to kind of do a search and learn how to do it myself. And I began I discovered by accident a book by Noam Chomsky called Syntactic Structures, which, by the way, for many people is a very boring book. It's very complicated. But this book was a revelation to me, because languages are obviously cultural. No two languages are alike, and yet there seem to be certain universal principles that govern all languages. So I said to myself, if there are universal principles that cover a cultural system like language, why can't there be a system that covers religion? So I began to speculate about principles that might govern religion. I was first interested in myth, but then I got much more interested in ritual. And so I began to study ritual and on the basis of this syntactic structures, I began to see that you could actually diagram rituals. A priest baptizes a baby. Okay, so here you have an agent, here you have an action, and here you have the patient of the action. So I began to analyze this, but the more you begin to do this kind of work, you get into psychology. What is an agent, you see? Right. So then I began to develop theories about what agents were, get into the whole notion of agent detection. Then you begin to get interested in experiments to describe all this. So that's how it started.
When did it first start? What was the year that you had that?
Okay, I would say that about 1972.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, or maybe even a little earlier, but 72 is when I found that book. And so by 75, I was invited to a conference and I read a paper called Ritual as Language, which, by the way, made no sense whatsoever to anybody. And then I wrote another paper with a friend of mine, a former student of mine, and about the ritual structures, and just kept getting rejected by journals. So ultimately, I decided I'm going to write a book. So this colleague of mine, my former student, but now colleague, Bob Macaulay, who's a distinguished professor now at Emory University, we wrote a book together called Rethinking Religion. And this book, Cambridge University Press published it, and it was regarded as a very esoteric book. Cambridge said, we'll never bring out a paperback. Well, it sold out in 3 months. And so then they brought out a paperback, and it's been selling ever since.
What was the primary theme of the book? What is the rethinking?
Well, we were interested in three things in that book. First of all, what is the difference between interpreting a phenomenon and explaining a phenomenon? We felt that the humanities did a great job of interpreting things, telling us about the meaning of things. But we felt there was very little explanation. And so we felt that we needed a more explanatory approach. So we first discussed the distinction between interpretation and explanation. Then we go on to the various approaches that people have looked at this.
What was your substrate you were looking at? Religious ritual? As an
Yeah,
example?
just religious ritual. We
Okay.
decided that here is actual behavior
Yeah,
that people
right.
do in the real world.
Yeah.
So focus upon it,
Right, sure.
you know?
Sure.
And so then the second part were the other theories that approached the subject. We showed that there were real structures to this ritual that had psychological significance and ultimately could be tested experimentally.
What kind of structures, for example?
Well, the whole business about agents and
Okay.
actions and
right.
patients, we discovered that there were even-numbered rituals and odd-numbered rituals.
Wow.
Odd-numbered rituals in which the gods are acting. Even-numbered rituals are when the gods are the recipients of action, you see. So whether, if I ordain you as a minister and say I'm representative of the god, which is very often what the priest is then, you see,
Right.
then the god is acting upon you. But if I make an offering of a sacrifice, then the god is the recipient of the action, you see. So no one had ever before noticed that there were a difference between these kind of ritual structures. And so we developed a very, very complicated system of all of this
And
stuff.
was there an interpretation to that in terms of the nature of the ritual?
Yeah, ultimately we tried to show that, you know, there were rituals, founding rituals. There were rituals that were central to the religious traditions. There were rituals that were more peripheral to the religious traditions. We predicted that you could do experiments to show that people would make judgments about importance, which once again showed that there was an experimental dimension to it.
What was the reaction to the book? Was there?
We've got 35 reviews.
Oh.
We were astonished.
Yeah.
You know, we were not expecting it to be successful at all. And it was very successful because it had been rejected by so many journals before, you know. I got to tell one more story. We were writing this book and Ulrich Neisser was the person who was, in a sense, the founder of cognitive psychology in America. He wrote the first textbook. And I went down to Emory to visit my colleague for the final version, and he introduced me to Ulrich Neisser. And so the first thing he said to me is, what are you writing on? What are you working on right now? And I said, well, Bob and I are writing a book. He said, I want to read it. So with great fear and trembling, you know, we handed him the manuscript. He took it home, read it that night, called us the next morning and said, I'm recommending that Cambridge University Press publishes that. So that's how they actually got an inside track because he was very famous.
How do you look upon the cognitive science of religion as helping to understand aesthetic cognitivism?
Oh, I think that, first of all, people who are interested in aesthetic cognitivism are interested in the responses of people to whatever, say to a work of art.
Right.
Okay. Some of these, and I should say one more thing. A response, you can really model a response. There's the stimulus, there's the emotional reaction to the stimulus, and then there's actually a feeling. And the feeling could be a feeling of the sublime, of the awe, of awesomeness, you know, transcendence, or any. So even though, you know, we are simply doing a scientific study, we can show that there are certain kinds of feelings that people have that have religious significance of one kind or the other. So that's the cognitive science of religion is underlying even an issue like aesthetic cognitivism, because it focuses upon the religious dimensions of art.